got the Mets and the Pods, full of big names that you have heard of. A couple of different lines, obviously, in the series here. We still have the Mets favored, and in Game 1, we also have the Mets minus 154 with Scherzer on the mound, right? Taking on Yu Darvish, who's been good for the Pods this year, but obviously their strength lies in their lineup, right, and their ability to hit the ball with a couple of the guys. Obviously, it's been a bit underwhelming at times this year comparatively. I think it's interesting you bring up the point about that other series too, Mo, with the Mariners and the Blue Jays. It's interesting what perception does for you. It seems like the Blue Jays sort of underperformed compared to their expectations we had at the beginning of the season, whereas the Mariners just completely outperform. And I think with the Mets, they were a team that performed at the level that they hoped to this year with a really, really improved offensive lineup, obviously, and then obviously we know about the pitching staff. But the Padres, I think they were a team, obviously, that also sort of underachieved with the same sort of expectations that the Mets had this season. And so you come in going, well, it feels like a Mets series. I will say I'm a bit nervous about the fact that the bats have gone a bit quiet for the Mets. I will say, the pitching, while it's been a little bit worse down the stretch, specifically the last 20 games, there were a few injuries to their two top starters there in Scherzer and DeGrom. So we'll see how they fare. Scherzer should be completely healthy for this one, which makes you feel pretty good about the Mets maybe in Game 1 compared to Darvish. But, I will say, lastly, for the Pods, they were really good this season when they weren't playing the Dodgers. That was a huge issue for them. Obviously, they played them about 19 times, won 5 of those games. So that's a big reason for them not even being having a few more wins this season, specifically their struggles with the Doyers. But coming in against the Mets, Nate, go ahead and kick us off in this one. Anything you like in the series, and definitely want to know what you feel about that Game 1 with such a high money line there for minus 154 for the Mets.
I mean, the Mets is the real psychological forecast here. Is how are they going to react to getting swept by the Braves and losing that division on the last few days of the season? I think with Max Scherzer on the mound, I do lean towards them rallying back. I mean, the guy is obviously a fantastic postseason pitcher. Yu Darvish, we know, doesn't have good postseason numbers. That's kind of skewed by 2 blowups against the Astros when they were cheating in the World Series. But at the same time, his best pitches are breaking balls, and the Mets have kind of hammered those since the second half. If you look at the entire sample of that, he did have success in 2 starts against these Mets, but 57 and 24 at home are the Metropolitans. Scherzer has a 1.67 ERA at home. I think it's understandable why they're minus 150 for this first game. And I think I want to look at them winning the first 2 because I think that's what they know they have to do to line up their pitching going forward. But I think that minus 150 for this first game is a fair bet rather than the Blue Jays, which seems a little bit more up in the air. I think you can definitely lean towards Scherzer as having the advantage here and the Mets as trying to get back on the right foot after what happened to them at the end of the season.
Yeah, I like the Mets as well. This is my other wager series price that I have locked in. I took the Mets minus 175 at DraftKings. The FanDuel line is closer to minus 200, which I think is a fair price. So a decent little chunk of value. I think if you grab the Mets on DK, I didn't price shop too much. So who knows, you might be able to even find better. Obviously the Mets, I have them with pretty big advantages. Very solid favorites in the first 2 games. If it goes to Game 3, I think it's going to be a flip at that point because I do believe it'll be Bassett versus Snell. Also, very large bullpen edge for the Mets. I think once again the Pods are kind of similar to the Blue Jays. Their pen is respectable. It's kind of a middle of the pack type of group. It's such a powerful weapon for the Mets to really be able to shorten these games. And I guess a big question is something Josh brought up for sure. It's how far apart are these offenses? The numbers through the season say the Mets are quite a decent bit better than the Pods. I don't think that's probably real. Juan Soto hasn't really been what they hoped so far. It seems likely that these offenses should be closer going forward. That being said, I just think the Mets have too big of an advantage with starting pitching in the first 2 games. And then having the better bullpen. I do think closer to minus 200 is more of a fair price. So I took the Mets, but it is the Mets. But hey, if you listen to Seth Lugo, he says they're better than the Braves. So, I guess at least some players in there have some confidence.
Yeah, old man Seth Lugo definitely running his mouth a bit. I'm sure he just asked a simple question. He's one of the more boring guys in the history of the league. I don't know why they're quoting him as like bulletin board material, but at any rate, I do agree. Snell is going to be a huge deciding factor when he comes on the mound. If you look at what he's done before the All-Star, really before July 1st, he was brutal. I think he had an ERA close to 6. Since then, he's thrown a ton more innings. He's gotten that down to about 2.4 in his ERA since July 1st. That xFIP at about 2.6. 4 Ks to walk ratio as well. So for every 1 walk, so you got to feel pretty good about him if you're the Pods, which is not quite what I would feel good about for those Mets in Game 2, but still think there's a good reason to believe in them in that offense.